Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something that is just absolutely mind-bending. We're going to explore the idea of training for the literal impossible. We'll be looking at a fascinating mix of declassified source documents and elaborate whistleblower accounts that all detail how the government allegedly spent decades creating highly specialized programs to push human capability to its absolute limit. We're talking about strictly documented military protocols for psychic intelligence, training pilots to fly non-conventional aerospace craft, and even preparing recruits for clandestine space missions. But why does this actually matter to us today? Because at the core of all these incredible claims is the ultimate boundary, human psychological resilience and the completely untapped potential of the mind. So let's unpack these methodologies.
Right off the bat, we have to ask ourselves, how do you train the human mind for the impossible? Well, whether we're looking at verifiable, declassified intelligence manuals or the most far-reaching whistleblower lore, one theme remains completely consistent across all our sources. Operating in the unknown requires structured protocols, immense psychological resilience, and deep neurological reinforcement. You don't just casually walk into a psychic spy program or hop into an advanced aerospace simulator. You literally have to physically and mentally reprogram the way your brain processes reality itself. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Training for the impossible. 2. The science of remote viewing. 3. The 6 stages of CRV. 4. The Mars jump room recruits. 5. Grooming future leaders. And finally, 6. The ultimate human frontier. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Training for the impossible. Reprogramming for extreme realities. Our sources describe an incredibly wide spectrum of programs. For instance, there's intuitive communications, or INTCOM, where trainees allegedly learn to interact with non-human intelligence through tonal interfacing, literally mentally humming specific tones to establish a connection. Then there's advanced aerospace training, where whistleblowers like retired Marine Captain Bill Uhouse claim pilots trained in flying disc simulators or neural interface chairs, basically flying reverse-engineered craft with their minds. The Navy has even reportedly explored sixth sense training for intuitive decision-making. To understand the gravity of these alleged programs, just look at this striking quote. According to whistleblower Andrew Basiago, when he asked his CIA handler, Courtney M. Hunt, why he specifically had to teleport to Mars back in 1981, this was the intense answer he received, because the survival of the human race depends on it. Today, we're looking strictly at how one would even begin to train for a burden like that.
Moving to Section 2. The science of remote viewing. Protocols of the mind. Let's look at the most extensively documented methodology we have, coordinate remote viewing, or CRV. Our sources define this as acquiring information blocked by distance, shielding, or time using strictly mental means. Developed at the Stanford Research Institute by Ingo Swann, the whole goal here was to take clairvoyance and treat it not as some mystical magic, but as a scientifically replicable military tool. And the primary challenge they faced? Acquiring that data cleanly by isolating the true signal from the mental noise.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the program's heavy focus on actual physical biology and neurological reinforcement. They relied on what the manual calls cognitrons. So they weren't just sitting around practicing mindfulness, they were actively trying to rewire the physical pathways of the brain. A cognitron is described as an assemblage of neurons that produces a composite concept when stimulated. Essentially, as a trainee learns to remote view, they are theoretically building entirely new synaptic connections. It's like working out a completely new muscle. But here's the catch. The trainee's biggest hurdle is noise management. The manual strictly contrasts the valid signal line against what they call the analytic overlay, or AOL. The AOL is just your mind's reflexive analytic left brain trying to instantly guess the target. So if a viewer senses a tall metal structure, their brain might just scream, "Oh, it's a stadium," even if the actual target is a bridge. Trainees are rigidly taught to recognize this reflex, declare an AOL break, physically write it down, and completely clear their mental workspace before continuing.
Section 3. The 6 stages of CRV. Progressive acquisition. To make this work, Ingo Swann developed a highly structured, progressive system to slowly build contact with what they called the matrix, the hypothesized informational framework of the universe. It's a step-by-step process. Stage I starts with capturing major gestalts like land or water, using simple, spontaneous marks called ideograms. Stage 2 moves to sensory data, grabbing smells and textures. Stage 3 introduces dimensions, using sketches to describe size and shape.
By stage 4, you're using a matrix format to manage a massive flood of data, including emotions and abstract purposes. Stage 5 actually involves interrogating those subconscious cognitrons we just talked about to break down complex concepts. And finally, stage 6 involves building physical 3D clay models to assess precise spatial and temporal relationships. It is incredibly rigorous.
To actually survive this grueling learning curve, the manual borrows heavily from sports science. They enforce a strict rule of quitting on a high point. Pushing the learning system too far leads to overtraining, a state where the system becomes totally saturated and psychic functioning just collapses. Trainees also heavily practice objectification. This is a core principle where they must immediately state aloud and write down all data to literally expel it from their system. It prevents mental clutter and keeps the neurological pathways clean.
All right, Section 4. The Mars Jump Room recruits, teleportation, and survival. Now we're shifting gears to some of the most far-reaching whistleblower accounts concerning time-space travel. These sources trace a wild chronological evolution. In the late 1960s, DARPA allegedly recruited gifted schoolchildren to be chrononauts for Project Pegasus. Why kids? Well, they were reportedly much more resilient to the psychological trauma of time travel, which literally drove adult subjects insane. These kids supposedly spent time in experimental labs playing games like Concentration to psychic-proof their minds. By 1980, this evolved into a 3-week Mars training class at the College of the Siskiyous, ultimately leading to teleportation jumps in 1981 aimed at a very specific strategic goal: acclimating Martian humanoids and animals to a human presence to facilitate a future base.
What really stands out here is the staggering list of high-profile individuals allegedly involved in this seminar as teenagers. Whistleblowers claim they attended alongside Regina E. Dugan, who would later go on to direct DARPA, and a young Barack Obama, then going by Barry Suitaro. The implication from these accounts is that this wasn't just basic survival training. It was strategic leadership grooming for a specialized teen task force. Section 5. Grooming future leaders. The intersecting worlds.
The sources also detail some truly bizarre intersections between these disparate programs. For example, Major Ed Dames, who is well documented as an Army coordinate remote viewing monitor with a reputation for targeting Mars, was purportedly the instructor teaching this 1980 Mars seminar. Meanwhile, CIA officer Courtney M. Hunt reportedly provided Basiago with highly specialized survival training, teaching him how to operate esoteric respiration devices and evade predators on the Martian surface. The overlap of personnel here is just fascinating. Basiago actually claims that he and Obama were briefly roommates during this training, where Obama was allegedly given briefing documents to strategically groom him for the presidency, based on time travel data. But honestly, the most surreal anecdote, Basiago recalls passing Obama on the desolate, highly dangerous terrain of Mars, where the future president simply remarked with a kind of dark fatalism, "Now we're here."
Which brings us to Section 6. The ultimate human frontier, ascension and beyond.
Let's zoom out for a second. Certain sources propose that expanding our consciousness through these extreme training protocols, whether learning to change planes of consciousness in INCOM or teleporting across the solar system, isn't just about gaining a military advantage or colonizing planets. It's intimately connected to the concept of ascension. This is the idea of overcoming the primary 3D illusions of our world, like the deeply ingrained belief that we are just separate selves struggling for survival in a universe of scarcity. The ultimate goal of this immense neurological and psychological expansion is described as reaching a permanent state of enlightenment in a higher dimensional existence. Which leaves us with a truly profound question to ponder. If the limits of the human mind are indeed only an illusion, what reality are we actually training for? Because, as we've seen, whether we are dealing with the highly rigorous, scientifically validated training manuals of military remote viewing, or diving into the profound whistleblower allure of clandestine time-space travel, the ultimate frontier has always been, and always will be, the human mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep exploring.